What's up, guys? It's Magnet here, and I am going to tell you guys all about the new stuff in Legacy of the Void beta. For those of you that have not seen it, they have changed a lot, and I'm going to kind of go over all those changes and talk about some observations I've had for my first day of streaming. I did stream a lot yesterday playing as Protoss, but I have seen a lot from the other races and experimented a little bit, so I'll just give you the first impressions and how everything feels and kind of talk over those changes really quickly so you guys can check it out. So we'll jump into the game here. First thing we should probably mention is that if you are seeking beta access, the way you're going to find it, if you do get your account flagged for us, it's going to be in one of these drop downs here. So this is the better place to check as opposed to waiting for the email, because I actually got the email about a day after this became enabled. So check it out there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over all the units here and kind of talk about what they've changed, how they feel, stuff like that. Overall, we can talk about some more stuff in later videos. I'm going to put out another video right after this talking about a game that I played and just kind of giving you guys a feel for Legacy of the Void as a whole. But we'll talk about the different unit changes and kind of browse through them really quickly, as we can see here on the help menu. So we'll go through Protoss first, since they are alphabetically the first in order. The first two units don't matter. Zealot and Probe, pretty much the same. The Adept is the first one that they added in, and the ability that came with this guy is a psionic transfer, which basically means that they can send out a kind of copy of themselves that will walk around, not really do anything, but after a set amount of time they will teleport to that location. So that was the big thing with this. I'm not totally sure if it's affected by loading into a warp prism or anything like that. I don't know if that cancels the ability. From what I can tell, it doesn't, but I haven't made sure. So overall, these things are weird. They're hard to explain. They also have another upgrade, by the way, which I didn't even know was in the game, which is basically the Mutaglaveworm bouncing is basically the exact same thing on the Adept, but as far as damage goes, this thing has 10 damage with 23 to light. The weapon speed is pretty slow. Their movement speed is pretty slow, which we can see here, 1.79. It feels slow for the type of unit it is. Everyone is complaining that this is a harassment unit, and honestly, the harassment damage that I've had people try against me has been extremely minimal. They want this unit to be more of a core unit, but I don't think it's going to be too useful until after this upgrade. But this guy's weird. The weirdest thing about them is really trying to get a feel for the control. Somebody asked me to do an Adept all-in when I was playing, and it was horrible against Zerg, because these guys take forever to fire. Like, if you try to stutter step the way you can with Stalkers, they'll just kind of derp around for a second and then fire before actually doing anything. So these guys are weird. I'm going to have to experiment with this thing a lot more to make sure, rather to see how this thing works as just a support unit in the army, considering that was kind of supposed to be the idea with it. So we'll see more on that later. Stalker, Sentry, pretty much the same. One thing that the Stalkers did gain is a lot of utility against things like Widow Mines and Marines, because this is one of the units that's going to benefit the most from the scan range that they changed, which basically means that the units scan better for enemy units that are on when they're on attack move. So you can attack move into detected, Widow Mines a lot better, and you'll hit the Widow Mine without walking into range, so that's nice. And from what I understand, these are also a lot better against early Marine pushes. So microing these things against Marines will kind of be more like you don't really take damage, whereas before you kind of would every once in a while, because they'd have a hard time targeting, and trying to click on the proper Marine can be a little bit difficult, but this thing definitely did benefit a lot from the scan range change. So these next three, nothing really changed on these. These are all pretty much the same. Warp Prism, I've been saying for a while that the load-in range is going to be a big deal, and the more I'm thinking about this, the more I think it's actually going to be a big deal only in higher levels. I think at lower levels you're not really going to notice that much of a difference, because if you were making mistakes that would make you lose your units due to not being able to pick them up properly, then you're probably going to make those same mistakes even with the range change. But we're going to have to wait and see on this. I was hailing this as probably the most overpowered change that they haven't done anything about yet, but it turns out it hasn't really been that useful so far, but I guess we'll see. Immortal's got this new barrier ability. Honestly, I'm going to go ahead and say it that the Immortal feels a lot worse than it's ever been before. This thing just feels really kind of paperish. It dies really easily, even with the ability. Immortal drops are not as strong as we once thought they would be, so this Immortal, I think we can almost uniformly say did get just a massive nerf. So that's interesting. But we'll have to wait and see if people can utilize those in a changed game. Colossus. This thing was cool. It almost looks like it got a new skin. I don't even think I've made one, and this skin looks a lot different, unless I'm imagining this, but it looks different to me. But the biggest thing that this thing got changed is that it deals a lot less damage now with its attacks. I think the change was negative 20% damage, or at least it is right now. So these things are basically not being used right now in the beta. I think I've made one or two and barely even noticed it was on the field. So these things are kind of been patched out of the game effectively for the time being. Obviously it is beta, there's going to be a ton that changes, but what people have been doing instead is going Disruptor. And this thing is crazy. This thing's really strong, it's really good for drops, really good for catching armies off guard and just blowing them up. These things are going to be what changes the game more than any other unit, in the sense that it really punishes people for walking around in big blobs, which is something they're trying to discourage. So if an enemy army is walking around in a big blob, 3 or 4 of these, if you can catch them all clumped together, it'll just kill their whole army. It's crazy. So these things are pretty wild. Phoenix are the same, Void Rays are the same. Oracle got this new ability called Stasis Ward, which basically stasis anything within the area once it gets blown up. Not the unit gets blown up, but the mine gets set off or whatever. I recently learned you can actually set these off yourself manually. I had no idea that was actually in the game, so that's pretty cool. So these can kind of serve as similar to things like Baneling landmines, where you can detonate it whenever you want and get super optimal hits instead of having it detonate itself. So that'll be something we're going to see here in the near future quite a bit as well. Tempest. I was pretty sure they said that they were going to revert the Tempest back to the original alpha, which was going to make them really fast and only hit ground and have this new ability which is called Disintegration, which deals a whole bunch of damage over time, which you can see there. But I loaded it up, and these are the Tempests from Heart of the Swarm. The movement speed is the old one, the attacks and everything are the old one, except for there's no plus massive tag on here. So that was kind of a disappointment, to be honest. I was hoping to get the fast one, so that kind of sucks. The carriers, these are actually really good right now, and namely because of this ability right here, this Release Interceptors. You're going to see this in the game that I'm going to talk about right after this video, so if you haven't watched that one, go ahead and check it out. But the Release Interceptors basically says that you launch them all, and you can just retreat your carriers, and the interceptors will stay there. One downside is this is very mineral intensive, so you basically can't build units during that point, but you can still spend them on things like gas, heavy units like Templar or Disruptors or something like that. So carriers are really, really strong right now, especially against Terran, particularly Terran mech. So we'll have to see how that lasts, but carriers are really good right now. Mothership, I believe, is the same. Yeah. There's a weird thing going on right now in the hotkeys that says a whole bunch of old abilities, but Mothership Core, Photon Cannon is the same. This is the Stasis Ward trap, and you can see that you can actually manually activate it yourself, and once you hit that, that will set it off. So you can either have it do it automatically, and that could be tripped by even one unit, or you can just wait and do it yourself, kind of like Baneling landmines. So interesting stuff from Protoss. Terran, let's check out their units here real quick. Basically everything up until Marauders has not been changed, so we'll take a look at the Marauders. The biggest change that they got was that they now have 2 attacks instead of just 1. It's the same overall damage, but it does get more muted by armor. So these things got basically a universal nerf, as far as I could tell right now. So Marauders, I think they're trying to push people off of Bio and more into mech right now, and that could be a very temporary change, but we'll have to see. Ghosts, Hellions, Hellbats, those are all the same. Widow Mines, those are the same. Let's talk about siege tank drops. One thing they added to siege tanks is that you can pick them up and drop them while they're in siege mode, and they will remain in siege mode. But I have not noticed this being very important right now. I see people doing it every once in a while, but then if they lose their medevac, then they also lose a tank, and they don't really get that much mileage out of it most of the time. So this really has not been that interesting of a thing quite yet. I think we're going to have to see some further improvements on the tank for it to really be a thing. Cyclones, these things are really strong, as people I'm sure have said. This lock-on ability, I believe, does it automatically. So this is effectively, as it works right now, a Phoenix with really long range that can hit air and ground. The only downside with this that I've seen so far is that they're really expensive, and losing them is pretty devastating. So it's not like one of these units where you could just get like 50 of them and just go kill someone, kind of like a Warhound or something. These things are super expensive and they're pretty hard to get to. So while they're probably strong for a reason, the same way that the Oracles are strong. I believe that they also cost the same, 150, 150. So this unit's pretty crazy, but I actually kind of like where it is right now. No change on Thors, except for they did lose their ability they got from Heart of the Swarm. I'm sure barely anybody even noticed because that ability was almost never used anyway. So not much interesting going on there. Viking, Medevac, all the same. Ravens, the only change that I can tell is that the point defense drone lasts for a lot less time. You can see it times out after 14 seconds. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, you're going to see some of these times and you're going to be like, what? These are really weird times. And that's because they changed the game timer to reflect actual time now. So this was supposed to be 20 seconds in the old StarCraft time, but in real time it's 14 seconds. So that's another interesting change. Banshees, I believe Banshees come free with Cloak now. You don't have to research Cloak, or am I wrong? At least this was like this in the alpha. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure they wanted to have Cloak a lot more accessible. That could have been a bug in the alpha as well. But it says here you have to research it at the Starport Tech Lab, so I guess I'm wrong on that. So it is listed as an upgrade, and there's also another upgrade that's available on Fusion Core, and that is to make Banshees super fast. It's more for like late game harassment type of strategies. And overall what they're really going for as a theme is that any air unit is designed to be super harassy right now. Especially battlecruisers. They got this new ability, which is the tactical jump, which basically means that it can warp into basically any location. Whether you have vision or not, it can go anywhere. So obviously there's a risk if you don't know what you're teleporting into. So you can teleport in, but the problem is that you can't just teleport back out. You have to be able to fly out or be able to protect them in some way. So this will probably be mostly for retreating injured battlecruisers, so you can send them back home and repair. So it kind of makes it so you never really have to commit to that, but if you get fed back or EMP'd, then you're basically screwed and you're stuck there. So I don't know what I think about this quite yet. We'll just have to wait and see, and it's been so few games I've barely even seen these anyway. Planetary Fortress the same, bunkers the same, thank God. Missile turrets the same, point defense drone like we talked about, times out after about 14 seconds, so nothing too crazy here. Auto turrets are the same. Let's check out Zerg. Zerg, everything's pretty much the same up until Zerglings when you get adrenal glands. Before, it increases the attack speed of Zerglings by roughly 20%, and they basically doubled that. So adrenal glands are a lot stronger right now. I have yet to see anybody get to adrenal glands against me because PvZs tend to end really fast and really dirty on both ends right now, just because of Ravagers and all the new Protoss stuff. They kind of clash really, really hard. So yeah, adrenal glands is definitely something that's there, but I have not seen it in use yet. Banelings are the same. Roaches are effectively the same, except for they can be evolved into Ravagers, which has been kind of the popular talk from Heart of the Swarm so far. Ravagers have this mortar ability, which basically deals 60 damage to any area, or any unit in the area, if they're hit by it, which can get really out of control. These things also bust force fields with this ability. These have been really popular right now, so almost everybody is running lurker but Ravager strategies. This thing's cool, but I'm expecting the damage to be toned down a little bit because it is pretty strong right now. Hydras are the same, except for they can also be morphed into something else, which is a lurker. The lurker is the exact same thing from Brood War, where they just burrow in the ground. They do line splash damage, kind of like a Hellion, for example. For those of you who aren't familiar. There is an upgrade to give the attack range +3, which you guys can see right there, which is really, really far. They start out by default at 6, which brings them up to 9. That'll outrange any base defense, so you can break cannon lines, you can break turrets. Well, not that that's really important. You could break planetaries with this thing. But I think mostly this is going to be more so for defensive purposes. I don't see a lot of attacks going on with lurkers quite yet. We'll just have to see. Viper's got a new ability here, which is this parasitic bomb, which is effectively a radiate from Brood War, which basically means it'll damage any air units within a target area. But if the unit that gets targeted by it dies, it stays in the same area, deals a whole bunch of damage. That's pretty wild as well. Nothing with Mutalisk, by the way. Corruptors, or excuse me, yeah, okay. Just going to say, I was pretty sure there was nothing, but that's just the tissue generation upgrade from Heart of the Swarm. Corruptors have the caustic spray ability, which basically makes it so that you can target enemy structures with this, and it will gradually deal damage over time, and by gradually I mean it'll go up pretty fast. And you can see that it starts out 7 damage per second for 4.3 seconds, and after that it increases to 35 damage per second, which is just insane if you can get some of these things going. 35 damage per second if you have 5 or 6 corruptors at even just that small amount. It'll get a building down in basically no time. It's pretty insane if you have that much time to be able to do stuff with that. Swarm Host got a huge change, by the way. Here's the Flying Locust upgrade that everyone's talking about. These things do still have to land, by the way. So you can see Flying Locust can use Swoop to land and attack. They're on the description. They can also spawn these locusts without burrowing, but you also do have to spawn them yourself. They're no longer automatic. You can research burrow and burrow them into the ground if you want to, but the idea with this unit is much more hit and run. So you just drop your locusts, you attack with them, and then you get out of there. As far as I understand, the locusts are a lot stronger right now. You can see 12 damage at 0.43 weapon speed. That's insane. That's like 2 Stim Marines, and then I think and then some on top of that. So these things are really, really strong right now. Trying to still keep the Swarm Host in a good place in the game, but the locusts seem just ridiculous right now. I fortunately have not seen these quite yet in action, but I can imagine if somebody can get them out, they're going to just wreck really hard in terms of being able to just pop in there and deal tons of damage, especially if they're doing damage on the opponent's side of the map. Then they can retreat and deploy once again before having to fight. Swarm Hosts still seem really good right now, guys. Ultralisks, or let's see, Infestors, they had something new on them for the alpha, but that did get removed. So this, I believe, is the same as it was before. Nothing new on the Infestor. Ultralisk got a new change, and that is that chitinous plating got even more armor added to the Ultralisks. So you can see their base armor right now is 1. If you get up to +3 armor, that's 4. And then if you get this upgrade, that makes the Ultralisk at 8 armor, which means that things like Marines will only do 1 damage per shot to these Ultras, and the Marauders are much worse against these things too, since they got their attack split up. So Ultras are pretty crazy right now. I have a feeling you're going to see a lot more Ultralisk-centric builds, but it seems like Zerg just has infinity options right now, and Ultralisk getting more stuff really adds to that. Broodlords, nothing changed as far as I can tell. Broodlings are the same, Overlords are the same, Overseers, Queens, Changelings, Infested Terrans, all the same. Spine Spore, the same as well. And the last change for Zerg is that Nidus Worms can no longer be attacked while they're building. So that's a pretty big upgrade. I have yet to see that too much so far, but you can imagine a lot of cheesy builds from Zerg and a lot of super annoying late game stuff from Zerg if you can't kill the worm while it's I want to say warping in, but while it's building somewhere. I think it's going to be a while before we see people using this, though, so don't expect to see too many Nidus Worm plays. I'd say for at least a couple of weeks. So yeah, that's all the new stuff that I have so far. So I hope that was at least a good overview of the units and whatnot for you guys. Again, if you want to look for your Legacy of the Void beta access, check it on the battle.net launcher to see if you have it first. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to be back with a lot more videos really soon. I just played a game that anybody that watched my stream yesterday has not seen yet, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about that game here in another video, which I'm going to upload right after this one, so I'll see you guys there. Take care. Awkward video ending.